in brands, I think, is people becoming too scared to put humour in brands.
Yes, I think that one of the problems with purpose is it tended to make too many brands too serious.
So true.
And I don't want to live in a world where everything is trying to save the world. Because let's face it, we won't save the world one brand at a time. It will require huge amounts of cooperation and indeed, in some cases, legislation, perhaps. But, this idea that every brand should be effectively seeking to occupy the highest moral ground it possibly can doesn't strike me as fundamentally sustainable. As it's one of those things that's cute when the first 10 brands do it. And in the case of some brands, Dove, for example, it was entirely appropriate to what Dove is as a brand. Okay, it's sort of beauty without artifice, as I think the phrase went. But if it ends up with, your sausage rolls effectively, talking about the migrant crisis, things have gone too far.
I've always thought about, you've got have you heard of Mr. Beast?
Yes.
The YouTuber who's got that chocolate bar brand. I've always thought, why isn't a comedian almost reinventing the penguin, right? The penguin chocolate bar.
What happened? You can still buy them, can you?
You can still buy them, but nothing happened to them. But you had a joke in that, right?
Yeah.
I think in today's society, it's so as you said, all these purpose brands, and I think it's amazing, absolutely amazing. But I do think there's a slight space for
humour, apart from anything else, just adds value to communication. So if you can make communication both pertinent, meaningful, persuasive, and funny, why wouldn't you do that? Apart from anything else, of course, the very best humour bears repetition. That's another point, which is saying the same thing. In fact, quite a lot of humour sort of relies on repetition to a degree. If you take programmes like The Fast Show, what was interesting about the first Heineken ad in the classic 1970s advertising campaign wasn't actually very funny. It wasn't very good. But what it is, it established the format, almost the catch, the punchline and the format of the joke. And then every subsequent ad was a riff on that. And in the same way, if you remember The Fast Show, the first instance of Jesse's diet, where Jesse walks out of the shed and goes, "This week I've mostly been eating pimentos." Okay, it's a completely baffling and nonsensical thing. But by the time you've done it 47 times, and then you flip it so that it's Jesse's fashion, and he goes, "This week I shall be mostly wearing Dolce and Gabbana," right? Okay, then you've really taken it, you've imbued it with something fabulous, and it's something you own. And I think one of the sad things in advertising. One of the sad things in advertising is we don't have those long-running campaigns which are variations on a theme to the same extent.
Yeah, is the Fast Show the one when it's the two builders who are speaking really posh, and then when a woman comes past, they start speaking. Hello, mate. Hello, mate.
And pals. But you're absolutely right. There's one where they're discussing a Radio 3 broadcast of something.
Yeah.
And then as soon as a woman walked past, they just suddenly cut to yelling general sexist abuse, and then revert as soon as she's gone past. Yeah,
I really do think. They're playing. This is like blue sky thing, but I love The Office. I think it's the funniest program ever. If they were to create some sort of, it's got such a diehard following. If they were to create an actual product out of that,
Wernham Hog,
if you just had David Brent one-liners. So back to the penguin thing, the whole penguin thing. You opened it up and you had a little shitty joke in there. Do you remember that about the penguin files?
I always wondered why. There are a lot of properties. Given that we've now seen a movie made out of Barbie, there are a lot of properties out there. I never quite understood why the owners of the James Bond franchise didn't create a kind of adult theme park around it.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's all these comedians have the following, and they have the.
You could definitely create a Vegas casino around Bond, couldn't you? The 007 and the Vegas Strip. That would definitely work.
Yeah, it's so weird. So the amount of ideas that just don't come. That just seems so obvious. And it's.
I suppose the brand's been a sort of famous legal minefield for some time, and you may. A lawyer may tell me that I'm being absolutely stupid because, you need the permission of the estate of this and the so-and-so's that and cubby broccoli's this and that and the other. But, I mean, one of the most interesting facets of brands that makes them valuable is their power to spawn kind of, oblique spin-offs. I know, as someone said, it's not, you don't necessarily have to have a brand extension. You can also have a brand bounce. I mean, an extraordinary case of brand bounce was Caterpillar, where, the entry-level Caterpillar device was probably $500,000, and then they went into workwear and boots.
Wait, so sorry, what's the difference?
JCB has done the same.
Yeah, but brand bounce, what does that mean?
A brand extension is where you go from, one flavour variant.
Right,
to
okay,
flavour,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you produce a light variant, okay?
Yeah.
That's where you're basically staying within your tram lines, you're staying within the category. Brand bounce is where you go into a completely different category and use your brand effectively as instant credentials to operate in that category. So Caterpillar, someone who makes, $20 million earth-moving equipment, patently knows a thing or two about, workwear or boots or whatever it may be. And therefore, almost from day one, bizarrely, they can operate with with far more credibility in that category than a newcomer could.
We should probably just jump in because there's stuff I can talk about on that as well.
Well, particularly in food as well, which is interesting.
But it's like that, I listened to a podcast you did where you talked about that Algorithms to Live By book.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book.
And I tried to get my head around it, but I was like, this is a bit too mathematical for my liking. But his whole thing of explore versus exploit.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of Caterpillar where they've exploited in like machinery, but then they've actually had the nice balance of explore and gone into hardware or wearable stuff.
It might have been someone licensed their brand.
True. Yeah.
Obviously, that happened with people like Vidal Sassoon and so forth. It was P&G who went along and realised that Vidal Sassoon, who I met once, absolutely delightful, fabulous man, by the way. Vidal Sassoon, he was a very famous hairdresser of the probably 60s, 70s, 80s. And he was the Tonian guy of the 1980s. But Vidal Sassoon, somebody spotted the fact that he had fame which went way beyond his capacity to exploit it within his particular field of men's and women's, essentially, hairdressing. Okay. And so presumably it was Procter & Gamble who just went along and said, we'll pay you some money if we can call a brand of premium shampoos Vidal Sassoon, which is exactly what they did. I don't know whether Caterpillar was a decision by Caterpillar itself or whether it was licensed. I've got a vague memory. It might have been the former. But it's just a very interesting thing to do. I think Ogilvy should do it as a brand because we have probably more, worldwide, we probably have more prompted and unprompted name recognition than any other agency, partly because of David was brilliant at publicising things. And to me, it seems a bit silly to waste that. There are areas like, for example, e-learning we could get into, which other agencies couldn't. So why wouldn't you?
Have you got a podcast?
I host one.
I know you host one, but
I don't have one of my own.
Specifically.
And we have a very interesting one historically called Oh Behave, which is the behavioural science podcast,
right?
Which we did for a long time with an Ogilvy. We're quite early to it, actually. I'm a fan. I mean, what I don't understand is why no one's produced a TV programme, The Best of the Week's podcasts. Or, actually, or a radio programme would be perfectly adequate in some cases, not all. But it seems kind of weird to me that there isn't a kind of podcast, because you have genuinely an extraordinarily high quality, and the quality isn't perfect, but the quality-quantity factor is extraordinary, actually.